It's not the day-to-day things at home that really start to build up and make a lot of mess for me. I'm able to manage things like the dishes and wiping down the counters and taking care of those things most days. But there are a lot of parts of maintaining and cleaning a kitchen that I just don't get to all of the time. So today we are going to do a really practical kitchen deep clean where you can do some of this or all of this in just a few hours. If you have a lot of time, say you have all day or you are using your entire weekend to do a really big deep clean, it's kind of like a free for all. But I actually only have a couple of hours while my daughter is in preschool to get things going here and to wrap up all of these projects. So when I'm trying to deep clean and I don't have a lot of time, the first thing I do is I break it up into sections. How you section off your kitchen or categorize it in your mind really depends on what you need to get done and the layout of your kitchen. But this really helps with the practical approach to deep cleaning because by sectioning it, you are reminding yourself that you don't have to get everything done. You just have to get these parts that you've identified done. It can feel really overwhelming to just look at your kitchen and say, oh, I have to clean this entire thing. But if you say, I just need to clean these 3 parts of my kitchen today, you can get a lot cleaned inside those 3 parts and a lot more than what you thought needed to be cleaned. So once I moved that coffee maker, for example, I did not know how dirty this switch for my garbage disposal was. So by sectioning it off and just cleaning that one section, you can look at it a little more clearly without worrying about all the other stuff. So I'm thinking about my kitchen in sections, and then in each section, I have tasks that I want to get done. So the first thing I want to get done is clear off the counters. The second thing I want to get done is wipe off the backsplash and the counters. And the third thing I want to get done in each section is wipe down the cabinets. And so by identifying that, I know what needs to be done in the entire kitchen in each section that I've identified. For me, part of clearing off the counter means also cleaning the thing that was on the counter. I try not to keep too much on my counters, but I do have some appliances that I use all the time, like my coffee maker. And it was really dirty. Every time I do a kitchen deep clean, I feel like I don't want to share the dirty things because it's like kind of gross. But when you pull out that tray, there's a lot of water and coffee that gets down in there, and it really needed to be washed. So I cleaned that out. I wiped down the coffee maker, and then I also cleaned all of the parts that go to the coffee maker. And one thing that I was surprised is how dirty the cord actually was too. So when you're cleaning these appliances, wipe them down top to bottom, front, sides, and back. Clean any parts that belong to them, and then also wipe down those cords because we don't think about that much, but they have a lot of dirt and dust on that just sit on our countertops all the time. During the day to day, I always wipe down my coffee maker after I use it, but I never actually clean underneath of it or clean the cord. And I also keep a container of coffee beans behind it, and I never really wipe that down either. So these are the things that start to collect a lot of dust and grime that need to be wiped down. But what's important to note here is that these aren't things I do every day. Don't waste your time during a kitchen deep clean, whether it's a full-blown all weekend deep clean or if it's just a practical one that you're doing like I am in a few hours. Don't waste your time doing the things that you always clean every day. You'll get to that later in the day because it has to be done anyway. Do the things that you can't get to every single day and identify which tasks are important enough to actually do. You could definitely get down on hands and knees and scrub your baseboards and scrub your floor by hand, but is that the most important thing that needs to get done during your deep clean? For me, it's not. I can do those things during the weekend. It's a lot easier to get my family involved for those sorts of tasks. In fact, we have been doing lately a family deep clean task every weekend. We work together to shampoo the carpets. Next weekend, we're working together to clean the baseboards. But these sorts of things, honestly, it's just easier for me to do myself, and it's more beneficial in the moment for me to do it now. Okay, let's talk about clearing clutter during a practical deep clean. Since I'm already taking everything off of the counter, this is the perfect time to get rid of anything that's been sitting around unused or replace with something more practical. I don't know if I'd really consider myself a minimalist, so to speak, but I do like to just keep things on my counter that I use all of the time and that are easy to clean. And during these deep cleaning sessions, it's pretty easy to identify things that just have been sitting around and have kind of been forgotten about and that are just collecting dirt. So the two things I have my sight set on this particular deep clean is the lamp in my kitchen and then the block that holds my knives. So the lamp in the kitchen I got for like $5 years ago at Home Goods, and the issue with that is it has a fabric shade. So over time, it's just been collecting a lot of dust and grime and grease from cooking, and I just can't get it off the shade. And then on top of that, I also broke the attachment that goes to it, so it needs to be replaced. I'll show you what I did with that in just a minute. But the block for my knives, I just don't use all the knives in there, and that block collects a ton of dust and it's hard to clean without taking every single knife out. So I actually need to find a better solution for my knives, which I have not figured out yet. If you have any great ideas, let me know in the comments because I just don't want that block sitting on the counter. Here I am cleaning out my utensil crock. This is one that goes unnoticed a lot in the kitchen. So I took out this little insert that my husband 3D printed for me because those metal utensils were hitting the bottom really hard and I was afraid it was going to crack. So I gave those a good wash and dry, but these are some pretty commonly overlooked items for me. I always wash my utensils in the dishwasher, but I don't always wash the holder. So when you are cleaning your kitchen, think about those items that need to be wiped down or maybe even decluttered that we often forget about. Things like the utensil crock, the knife block, salt, pepper, any spice jars, oil and vinegar bottles, of course your coffee maker, any pod baskets, cutting boards, canisters, your mixer, in my case a grain mill, if you have a paper towel holder, any bowls that you have sitting out, cookbooks, which I'll show you that in a minute. If you have any mail or paper sitting around, getting rid of that stuff, and then making sure if you have a charging station or any cords in your kitchen that they are cleaned out, tidy, and wiped down. As you are decluttering and wiping things down, washing and drying them, or maybe even getting rid of them, make sure that you are putting them back in their rightful home immediately. I have made the mistake in the past of decluttering and then I have a pile of stuff that I don't want and it has nowhere to go, or I wash and dry a whole bunch of things. I just let them sit out to air dry and now I have a big pile of things to put away later. So if you put things away as you go, when you're actually finished cleaning, you have a finished product. The whole job is done when you have finished cleaning. Whereas if you don't do that, now you have another job to do after you finish deep cleaning. And my general rule is if I don't have a home for it and if I can't find a home for it, it has to go. Now, two things that I always clean during a deep clean is the stove and the sink. I always save the sink for last because it gets dirtier and dirtier as the deep cleaning goes. So I save that for last, but the stove I always scrub down. I have some burned on food on my stove that I just cannot get off. If you have any recommendations for how to get that off, let me know in the comments. I scrubbed until my elbow hurt and it didn't budge. But otherwise, I just scrubbed the stove down. The one thing I really wish I could have gotten to this day, which I did not have time for, was to clean my oven. But I think that just goes back to what I was saying before, to section things off and to do things that you know you can get done within that amount of time. And the rest of it, don't worry about it. I mean, worry not, because that mess will still be there later so I can get to the oven later. It's more important to get things done that I know I can finish. I also didn't bother with wiping down the front of my appliances. I do that, I'd say probably about once a month or so, or of course as needed. But at this point during my deep clean, I needed to go pick up my daughter and I really wanted to focus on cleaning out some of the drawers and a few other tasks rather than worrying about something that I can squeeze into just about any part of my day. But while I was out getting my daughter, I stopped at Home Goods to find a glass lamp. And I replaced my lamp with this one. This is not my forever lamp in my kitchen. In fact, I've already replaced it with something I like much better. This isn't really the aesthetic I was going for, but the other thing about this lamp, I don't want anything that's open on the top because that means dust and grease and dirt are going to go inside and settle at the bottom. So I replaced it with like a Tiffany fake lamp that I got off of Amazon. I'll show that in an upcoming video. So that way anything can land on the top of the shade and then I can just wipe it off and keep it really clean and tidy. During a deep clean like this, I think it's really important to keep your other tasks really simplified that day. So just because you're deep cleaning your kitchen doesn't mean you don't have to feed your family. So I am making lunch for my daughter and me, and I'm keeping it super simple. I'm just making a really easy grilled cheese with some frozen bread I have. This is actually fresh milled sourdough Pullman bread. I have the recipe for that over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. I will leave it in the description box below. But by keeping that lunch really simple, that gives me a little more time and space to do some other tasks, but to also reduce some of that overwhelm. A kitchen deep clean, whether it's a practical one or a full blown all weekend deep clean, it is another thing that you have to do that eats up time. So keep your day as simple as you can so that way you can focus on the things that matter during your deep clean. And you're also cleaning your kitchen, so you don't want to mess it up right away with cooking. So I'll show you how I handle dinner after a deep clean here in a few minutes. But first, I also really want to clean out my 2 utensil drawers. In my kitchen island, I have 2 drawers, and in one, I keep all of our everyday silverware and knives. And then in the other are things like measuring cups, measuring spoons, sort of like odds and ends for utensils. So I don't know if I've ever really cleaned these things out. And I noticed the other day that they had a lot of crumbs and stuff in them. So I took everything out of them, and the one is wood. So I didn't want to wash it, but I just wiped it down and got everything out. And then I did the same thing I did with the counters. If it's not something we use all the time, it did not go back in that drawer. So I actually pitched a couple of things. I have a couple of things that I'll be donating. And then anything else that we actually use went back into the drawer in a really tidy fashion. And then I did the same for the other drawer, except that insert's actually plastic, so I was able to wash it. I like the way the wood one looks, but I like that I can wash the plastic one. So I'm not actually sure why I have 2 different ones. Somehow that just ended up that way. But I actually think I kind of prefer the plastic one just because it is easier to wash. One thing that I've done a lot in this video that I haven't talked about yet, though, is wiping down the fronts of the cabinets. So in my January kitchen deep clean, which I'll link in the description box below, I used my steam cleaner to clean the front of the cabinets, and it worked like a dream. But I really didn't have the time on this day to get the steam cleaner out. But also, they really didn't get that dirty between the time I steam cleaned them and now. That steam cleaner took off a lot of dirt and grime, and it's been a lot easier to keep up with those sorts of surfaces since steam cleaning them one time. So on this day, all I did was take a damp rag and just wipe down the fronts of the cabinets and then also the insides of the door, especially where our hands touch. Over at the end of our island, I have this little cart that I pushed over there. We really want to extend our island, but right now it's just not in the budget. So we're just waiting for the economy to change a little bit before we invest in our home that way. So I keep this little cart that I had in my dining room there right now. But on that, I keep this box where I put my daughter's art. So that way, anytime when we come home from school, I can take all of her art and put it right in that little box before we even get in the house. And then I also keep my cookbooks there. So I wipe down all of those cookbooks and I wipe down that box. Cookbooks collect a ton of dust. They sit around, they look nice in the kitchen, but they definitely sit around and collect a lot of dust and grime. So that's a really easy thing to wipe down and tidy up anytime you're doing a practical deep clean. The other thing I like to do every time I clean my kitchen like this is to wash the filter in my dishwasher. Now, in that January deep clean that I mentioned before, the filter to my dishwasher was so dirty. It was mortifying to put on YouTube, but I did it anyway. But I will say, ever since I switched to the Azure standard dishwasher detergent, my filter has not been dirty at all. I mean, there's like a little bit of grime in there, that's to be expected, but I have barely had to clean it. So in your day-to-day, really pay attention to what products you're using and are they actually making your home cleaner and making your life easier. These days, I just keep around a few cleaning products. Of course, Azure Standard's dishwasher detergent. I do keep around regular dish soap for hand washing. Dr. Bronner's soap, vinegar and lemon juice with a little water will go a long, long way. I keep around some stainless steel wipes and Barkeeper's Friend. But other than that, I don't use a lot of cleaning products because I found that generally a lot of those commercial cleaning products, they might smell kind of good, but they actually leave a lot of residue and it's not getting things as clean as I would like them to be, which makes a deep clean even harder. One of the spots in my kitchen that's the hardest to keep up with is around the sink. There's just a lot of water and soap and dishes and food that gets back there. So I save the actual sink basin for the very end of the day because like I said before, it's just kind of filling up with dishes all day long. But I do like to wipe down behind the faucet. I like to clean the faucet itself and definitely get the windowsill here. A lot of dust collects here. I have these plants on the windowsill that I have just because honestly, I meant to plant them like months ago in a pot. I just never did. So they're just still sitting there. So I'm just moving them and wiping them down. The one thing I really need to do, which is not really a kitchen deep clean, but I do need to get outside and clean the outsides of those windows, but that will just happen a different day. It's definitely not for today. So I like to wipe those parts down. And then when I wrap everything up, I really like to make the house smell good. I don't use a lot of cleaning products with a lot of odors, but I do have these little DIY plugins that I like to use. I got these on Amazon. I'll leave a link for those in the description box, but you just fill them with a little bit of essential oils and some water and plug them in. The one thing is they don't last long. They only last for like 2 to 3 days. So I do recommend using inexpensive essential oils like lavender or something like that because it does roll through it pretty quickly. But last up for a kitchen deep clean is don't dirty your kitchen that day if possible. So I am just throwing a freezer meal that I made a few weeks ago. I have a video actually with those 50 freezer meals that I'll leave in the description box, but I'm just throwing that in the Instant Pot. It is mess free and we can enjoy the rest of our day in a really clean kitchen.